Hey everyone, I'm Ian Douglas, the author of the website techinterview.guide. I do live streams every Sunday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern about topics relevant to interview preparation for the tech industry. I occasionally record longer Q&A sessions, and I've started to break those into smaller videos to post. And there'll be information at the end of this video about how to get in contact with me if you have additional questions. Let's get to it. Is it bad to get a job through a staffing agency? Do staffing agencies pay employees in cash? I have a very strong love-hate relationship with staffing agencies. In the tech industry, we also call them headhunters, which is a bit of a derogatory term when you think about how that term came to be. But I've got a whole section of blog articles on iandouglas.com that you can go read. Not right now. Pay attention to the stream. That's why you're here. But I've got a whole bunch of blog articles, and a lot of them, honestly, are like 10, 15 years old, and so they may not even qualify anymore. But I think in staffing agencies, the idea there is they're trying to get a resume from you so that they can shotgun your resume out to 50 jobs at a time. And so you think you're only applying for a job at a staffing agency when really they're sort of shopping you around to other people. Now, I've also had a job in the past where I got hired as an employee of a staffing agency to go work at one of their clients. And that's what they call staff augmentation. And doing staff augmentation is actually a pretty good role because you've always got a job with the staffing agency, but it's their job to go get you a job at some other company. And so the questions that you want to ask them are, how do you keep your pipeline full? What happens if you don't have a job for me to go to? Do I still get paid? Like, do you have work internally that I can work on if I'm not at a client site? That kind of staffing agency is very different from the kind that that I mentioned at the beginning of the answer, where we talk about them as like third-party recruiters, where you're giving them a resume and they're shopping your resume out to other companies. Those kinds of people, they can be helpful earlier in your career. Later in your career, they're just annoying. And you just tell them to go away, and hopefully they do. But early in your career, it can be a good way to find a job. But in my experience, entry-level jobs, it's harder to kind of pitch those kinds of jobs. Typically, those kinds of staffing firms, they're going to get 15 to 20% of your annual salary as a kickback from the company when you get hired. And companies, as many of you on the stream and watching this on YouTube later are finding, as an entry-level dev, it's already pretty hard to find a job. Trying to convince a staffing agency that you're worth taking a chance on is going to be hard because they're going to have a harder time getting your resume into hands of people just to get 15 or 20% of a lower salary. They would rather go after someone like me who's going to get a much, much higher salary, because that 15 to 20% kickback that they get typically after 90 days or 6 months of me working there, that percentage that they get is way higher than for an entry-level dev, where, maybe you're making 60 to 80K, maybe 90K. But if I'm going out and getting a job for like 250, 300K, that percentage is obviously way higher. And so it's way more lucrative for them to target senior engineers. But then there's this other kind of staffing agency that we call staff augmentation. And sometimes those are called consultancy firms, where you go and you become an employee of that consultancy firm, and then they hire you out to other companies. Excuse me, I need some water. Those kinds of companies, you actually learn quite a lot. In my experience, and I'm hoping to get a couple of folks on the stream at some point who have actually worked for those kinds of consultancy firms, just to kind of hear their experience and what it's like jumping from project to project. Generally, those kinds of companies, they will rotate you through projects every 4 months to 6 months. And so if you're the kind of person where you constantly like something fresh and new all the time, it's actually a really good place to work. If you like the focus and the dedication of like, I want to learn one thing really well, it's not as good of a job because you're going to be bounced around from project to project, maybe in different technologies. And the other danger with getting those kinds of jobs is if you go work on site for that customer of theirs, you're looked at as an expert. They're paying a lot for you to be there. Generally, they're paying your company anywhere from 2 to 3 times what your company's paying you. So let's say I go to a staffing firm and I make 100K. They're charging that other business like 250,000 a year, like worth of like a couple of months of salary to have you there. And so that other company is paying quite a lot for you to be there. And they're like, you better be super productive and you better be an expert in all the things. And if I ask you a question, you better have an answer. And so there can be a lot of pressure put on you for that kind of thing. And the folks that I want to have on the show, we're going to get into those kinds of details just so you can all hear what it's like to be at that kind of role. So the second part of the question was, do they pay employees in cash? Very few places actually pay in actual cash. You're going to get some sort of like bank transfer or something at best. But they're probably not going to hand you cash at the end of the day or at the end of the week. That's not a typical way of doing business in the tech industry. Now, if it's like a temp agency or something like that where you're doing non-technical work, then maybe they'll pay you in cash. But again, it's not very likely because they've got to track that kind of stuff, legally for taxes and government tracking and all that kind of stuff. So they're probably not just going to hand you cash. It'll have to go through like typical payroll kinds of things. Hey, thanks for watching. I love helping people out with interview prep, and I hope this video helped you in some way. If you found this Q&A useful, please consider subscribing. You can follow me on Twitch as well for the live stream twice a week. Check out techinterview.guide/streaming for more information. I also have a daily email series that you can subscribe to on the website. There are never any ads, and when you finish the series, I scrub your information out of my database permanently. Finally, if you have a question that you'd like answered on the stream, you can find my contact info on techinterview.guide. I prefer LinkedIn or email. If you leave your question in a YouTube comment, it might take me longer to find it, but I'll see you next time.